I'm not going to lie, this Ross Chastain story got a lot messier after COTA. What looked like just another bad weekend for the number one team quickly turned into suspensions, penalties, and even more pressure on Trackhouse. Because this is not Ross Chastain himself getting suspended, but NASCAR did hit the number one team after the race at Circuit of the Americas, and 2 Trackhouse crew members are now out for the next 2 points events. So, in this video, we're going to break down exactly what NASCAR penalized Ross Chastain's team for, which crew members got suspended, and for how long. Why this penalty hurts even more when you look at how Chastain has started 2026. Why this is not the same thing as NASCAR accusing Ross of dirty driving. And then we also have to talk about the other Ross Chastain story that is still hanging over him right now. That late race Atlanta move on Austin Hill that had people arguing all over again about the way Ross races. Because when you put those two stories together, you get a much bigger picture of where Ross Chastain sits right now. And if you're a Ross fan, this one stings because it feels like the kind of week where nothing is going clean. The performance has been uneven. The result at COTA was ugly. And now the crew chief room has another problem to solve right when the calendar is starting to speed up. Let's start with the actual penalty because this is the most important part and also the part that can get twisted fastest online. NASCAR issued its penalties from the COTA weekend, and Ross Chastain's number one team was on that list because the team lost a tire late in the Cup race. Under NASCAR's current rules, a wheel detachment in the race carries an automatic crew member suspension. So for the number one team, crew members Josh Appleby and Kenneth Pazza have both been suspended for the next 2 points events. What makes this even more notable is that there were no other penalties from the weekend at COTA. So when NASCAR released the discipline report, the number one team stood out. Now, here's where the story gets more frustrating for Ross, because this penalty lands on top of what has already been a rough, inconsistent start to 2026. Through 3 races, Chastain has not been a total disaster. But he definitely has not had the kind of clean launch that helps you settle into a season. He opened with a 20th place finish at Daytona, then showed real pace and grabbed a 3rd place finish at Atlanta, and then COTA turned into a nightmare with a 35th place finish. And when you add those up, Ross Chastain sits 20th in the point standings. That is not where a driver with his speed, his aggression, and Trackhouse expectations wants to be this early. Tyler Reddick is out here making history, opening the year with 3 straight wins, and the gap to the top is already massive. So while Ross is dealing with a penalty and replacing suspended crew members, the championship leader is building a cushion the rest of the field can barely see over. That's what makes this one feel bigger than just a loose wheel. A loose wheel by itself is bad. A loose wheel when your season already feels unstable is a much bigger problem. NASCAR did not say Ross Chastain drove recklessly at COTA. NASCAR did not suspend Ross. NASCAR did not hit the team for an on-track retaliation move or something dramatic like that. This was a wheel detachment penalty. But in a sport this tight, those technical penalties still hit hard because they come at the worst possible time, right when teams are trying to establish consistency. The number one team got penalized because they lost a tire late in the race. Period. It is not a judgment on Ross as a dirty driver. It is a costly operational mistake, and NASCAR treated it the way the rulebook says it should. Still, even if this specific penalty is not about Ross being Ross, the bigger Ross Chastain conversation is never far away. In the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Atlanta, Ross C.S. Chastain had the kind of finish that instantly gets people yelling. Late in that race, Chastain got into Austin Hill in turn 3 on the final lap, and Hill got wrecked. That move cost Hill what could have been his 2nd straight win to begin the 22-6 season. And if you know anything about drivers after they lose a race that way, you already know how that went. Austin Hill was furious. He described it in the simplest possible way, saying, "That's just the things he does." And that line alone tells you how Ross is viewed by some people in the garage. Hill was clearly not interested in smoothing it over either. He said he couldn't care less to talk to Ross Chastain after the race. That is not normal irritation. That is a guy saying, "I'm not wasting my breath." But this is where the Ross Chastain story always gets interesting, because not everybody saw it the same way. Ryan Blaney, speaking on Door Bumper Clear, took the opposite approach and basically said fans shouldn't act shocked when 2 guys racing for it all come together in a last-lap moment like that. Blaney said, "At the end of that race, I don't blame either of them for doing what they did. Austin has to throw the block, and Ross is going to take the run. It's just part of it, and it kind of accumulated at this late run that came from Ross because it took him a long time to get there. If that run comes halfway down the backstretch, you don't see that. But he just came into turn 3, and Ross is like, well, I got to take this somewhere. And Austin is like, well, I got to protect. Just two guys that came together. That's part of that racing. And honestly, that quote is useful because it captures the two versions of Ross Chastain that people see all the time. That split is a huge part of why Ross is such a lightning rod in this sport. The crazy part is that while Hill and Chastain were sorting each other out, Sheldon Creed was the guy who benefited and went on to win his first NASCAR Xfinity Series race. So once again, the Ross Chastain effect showed up. The incident itself became just as big a story as the actual winner. And when you zoom out, that's what makes this whole week so tough for Ross. The COTA penalty and the Atlanta controversy are totally different situations, but together they create the same headline energy. Ross Chastain is once again at the center of something messy. One is a team mistake, one is an aggressive racing incident. But both feed the same feeling that the number one camp just cannot get a quiet week. That matters because NASCAR seasons are as much about rhythm as they are about speed. Teams need weeks where they can just execute, stack points, and move on. Right now, Ross does not have that. He has a third at Atlanta, proving the speed is there. But the rest of the picture is way too noisy. Daytona did not give him the launch he wanted. COTA ended in 35th and now carries a pit road-style penalty with it. Atlanta, in the lower series, created another classic Ross debate. So even when he is part of the story, it is not in the cleanest possible way. And if I'm looking at this from Ross Chastain's side, the frustrating part is probably this. The penalty is real, but it also adds to a public perception problem that may be even harder to shake. Because to casual fans, a penalty is a penalty. They do not always separate wheel detachment from bad behavior. They just hear Ross Chastain, NASCAR discipline, suspension, and the story starts writing itself. That's why the next couple of weeks are big,